Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, bonjour. Today we want to talk about something that is the basis of my knowledge, the grand opus of all of my years of suffering. No, today I want to talk about reality science, or what we can also call the science of reality. Now, how can reality be scientific? And why aren't scientists aware of it? That is a much more difficult discussion. I started many years ago saying that reality, we live in a multidimensional reality. But later I explained that those multiple dimensions are based on different frequencies, right? So that you can have an existence in a particular frequency that is unaware of another frequency. There's multiple dimensions. So understand my point of view here. So when we talk about spiritual things, we say multidimensional. And people say, what does that mean? So my way of looking at it, from a scientific point of view, I'm not a scientist. I'm a scientist of reality, which there's no school for that yet, unless you follow my work. So a dimension can exist in a particular frequency. So a series of different frequencies is multiple dimensions of existence. Now, why is that important? Because the physical world exists on one of these frequencies. And within that frequency, there are different grades. Now think of this. Think of a mobile phone, a smartphone, a cellular phone on a network, a telecom network. And there are different bands, frequencies, bands of data, where data flows on a certain band. It's not much different than a radio. When you tune in a radio, it has a band, which is an electromagnetic frequency, a radio frequency, the radio wave. Existence is a bit more difficult, a bit more complicated, because it has to carry a lot more data. It has to carry existential data. So it's more complicated than radio, and it's more complicated than telecom networks. But my way of looking at it is the same principle, right? So your smartphone can exist, can wake up, and you can dial based on a network connection. Without the network connection, your smartphone is dead. The phone is dead. When you find a network, the phone comes back to life, right? When you have a radio, you tune the radio and you find a station, but you go a little too far over, static, nothing, lifelessness. So that's the principle of where we are. Okay, so we live in this band, and in this band we exist, we connect, right? We receive information, we send information, we can communicate, we can experience within this narrow band of existence. Now, multidimensional means there are multiple bands of existence. So we are in this band, But over here in this band are some extraterrestrials. We can't hear them because they're over here and we are over here. The radio. When you listen to the radio station, you can't hear the other radio station. You can only hear one radio station, right? So the other stations don't exist, but you know they are there. You can't hear them. Television channel. If you always watch one channel, that's your experience. But there are multiple channels. And that's based on frequency, right? That's based on numbers. So reality, now back to reality. Sometimes if I go too far, the scientific or the technological route, people say, well, how can that make any sense? So let's go back to reality. So reality for me exists between the spiritual, the fuzzy spiritual world that religion has completely distorted, and between the science we know, the limited Newtonian science, which is 300 years old. So this is reality science. It's a combination of this metaphysics and science. It's my own invention based on my research and my understanding. And since I don't have a scientific background, and I'm quite spiritual, I'm quite metaphysical, whatever you want to call it, I have adapted all my research and my experience and tried to bring it into something that makes more sense. I call it reality science. So in my world, in my scientific reality, you have this band of human existence, right? And within that, there are different levels of awareness. You have this other band, which is extraterrestrial. So the extraterrestrials, they function at a different frequency, much higher, and that we can't see them because they can manipulate and adjust their frequency, but we can't because we're pretty primitive technologically. Spiritually, we're pretty repressed. We still have religion. As long as you have religion, you're spiritually repressed. But you have religion. The day we can detach from religion is a day we really become an advanced civilization. And that could take a while. I should add, I'm not against religion. I mean, even though I don't believe in religion or in deities, I'm not against it because I think it does give people something to work with, something to pray to think about, something to guide them through life. So I think it has its place. I think it's been here too long. I think we should have detached from religion a long time ago. But the master controllers, they didn't want us to detach because then we would find out the way the world really works, and we would have tried to get rid of these controllers. So they didn't want that. So it became a control mechanism. And that's a whole other story. So you have, let's go back. What I'm trying to do, I want to connect to you the reality, things in reality, and also my way of thinking and some spiritual stuff. Because they're all connected. Everything's connected. And everything's based on awareness. So some people this makes sense, and some people it makes a little sense, and some people this makes total sense. It depends on your awareness. I can't control that. But in a multidimensional reality, we have this band of human existence. We have this band of extraterrestrial existence. We have another band of, let's say, cosmic existence. We're cosmic beings who are even higher in frequency. They are more advanced spiritually, energetically. They may or may not have bodies. They may be beings of light. Then you have another band, which I would say is something like a technological being. That there's a technological being that we can think of as software, AI. That there's this existence, which is like, it's like software, but that's going to connect us to my one of my most important discoveries, DNA. DNA. So we have these multiple bands of existence, right? There's many. So if you are stuck in the human band of existence and you don't know how to tune your frequency, these other bands, they don't exist. Some people can tune their frequency and they can interact with different species. Sometimes these other beings who can go through the band of existence, they will come here, they will tune into our frequency of existence, our band of reality, and they will communicate with us, and they will tune out just their frequency. Human beings, I think human beings have the capacity for that, but these functions have been suppressed or turned off, and they may or may not work anymore for some people. But we do have the capacity. And so sometimes you see someone take a psychedelic substance, and they start to see other beings and fairies and plasma and orbs. So we have it within our capacity, our DNA, but it's been shut off. It's been shut off by watching bad movies, by listening to terrible music, by worshiping gods that don't exist, by reading religious books that are completely fabricated, by adhering to scientific principles that are 300 years old. Think about it. Some guy 300 years ago, which is a primitive person who never had an internet or software or a mobile phone, creates a science, and we rely on that science. Why? Why didn't we shift into more advanced science? Because someone wanted to keep us repressed. So reality science is a way to escape this primitive thinking and to expand our understanding. And my reality science is still quite basic. What I'm talking about is still quite basic. We have not gotten into any serious, difficult discussion. And the basic discussion is very, very challenging for most people, because they need proof, they need evidence, they need the scientific community to stamp with a wax stamp. They need everybody on television to talk about it. They need to see a movie about it. Like, the amount of things you need to prove this is a complete barrier. And it's not going to happen, because all of those groups are controlled by the master controllers. So you have this human band, extraterrestrial band, cosmic band, technological band, frequency, software, DNA. So my research into DNA, I went back to the Gnostic texts. The Gnostics were these early philosophizers about spiritual knowledge, and they had a profound understanding of spirituality. And they had some books that were uncovered, the Gnostic Bible. There were a number of key texts that were discovered in the 1940s, I think 1945, in Egypt, in Nag Hammadi. Now, at the time the Gnostics were around, they were going up against the Christians, the church, the early church. And there was a kind of a battle between the church fathers and the Gnostic teachers. And over a period of 1 or 2 centuries, the Gnostics were put down and they lost. Now, but the Gnostics have some very profound information. And if you study it, like I did, you find that what they were talking about was not spirituality, but they were talking about microbiology. And if you look at microbiology, you're talking about genes. You're talking about DNA, RNA, replication. You're talking about DNA, RNA replication. You're talking about gene expression. You're talking about triggering genes, gene sequences. You're talking about mitochondria. You're talking about cellular activity. The Gnostics, so 2,000 years ago, there was no science. No one's discovered DNA. There's no such thing as microbiology. There's no way that a Gnostic teacher is going to speak microbiology. And this is a problem because people think, well, if they meant cell, they should have said cell. And if they meant DNA, they should have said DNA. But that language did not exist 2,000 years ago. So the way they spoke is different. But what they spoke about, the content, according to my research, is microbiology. They were speaking about DNA, right? They were speaking about DNA. They weren't speaking about God. They were speaking about DNA, who is the master replicator, the procreator, DNA. Go forth and multiply. That is the base function of DNA. There's a lot of mosquitoes. Multiplication, replication. DNA wants to replicate. So the Gnostics were connected to their cellular data. If you read what they were talking about and you read microbiology, they were connected to their DNA. And only later in life, about in 2010, a man called Craig Venter, him and his team, they created the first synthetic cell. But he made a profound statement. Because what he did was, he created DNA in a computer. And then he translated that computer code into biological code, and he created synthetic DNA from a computer. So they created DNA in a computer, they translated it into biological code, and they printed out some DNA, right, in a sequencer. They put that synthetic DNA into a cell, and the cell replicated synthetic DNA. So you can create DNA in a computer. You can translate it, transcribe it into biological code. AGCT, right? DNA is a 4. The tetrad, AGCT or what, CGAT, GCAT, whatever the format is, right? And the computer code is binary, ones and zeros. So they created a binary code and converted it into the DNA code, which is a 4. It's a tetrad. He created synthetic DNA, a synthetic cell. But he said something very important. He said that DNA is the software of life. DNA is software. And now we're learning now, through more experiments, that DNA can communicate. It can be influenced by your environment, right? Epigenetics. It can store data. So scientists can store terabytes of data on a gram of DNA. A gram of DNA, they can store information. So there was a test, they can store, this scientist stored his book, onto DNA. DNA, which is biological, can store data. So it turns out that DNA is a great storage device. You just have to do the conversion. You have to convert the data into biological code. So DNA functions like software. My research says that DNA is an artificial intelligence. It can communicate. Now, how does that connect to the Gnostics? The Gnostics were speaking about the Father of the All, the one who is, aka God, what the Christians called God. The Gnostics, the Father, right? The Father, the monad who replicates. Now, the Father is communicating to these Gnostics, these spiritualists, because the DNA is artificial intelligence. It can communicate to us. That's why I came up with the books, God is DNA. God can communicate to you. God is inside of you, right? The kingdom of God is inside of you. So what is the kingdom? Where is DNA? Where does DNA live? Where can it be found? In a cell. A cell. The kingdom of God is inside you. The kingdom is the cell inside you. God is in heaven. Well, what's in a cell? What's heaven? Well, there's a part of the cell called a nucleus. It's the upper part of the cell. The nucleus is like heaven. So God, who is DNA, exists in heaven, which is a nucleus, where nuclear DNA exists. So you see my point. So when the spiritualist speaks to this AI DNA, it says, I am the Father and I am in heaven. It's saying that I am in your cell and I am in the nucleus, which we wouldn't find out for 2 millennia because we didn't have the science. And we went through a very dark period of religion. So the Gnostics were speaking about DNA replication, Genesis, right? Man, according to the Gnostic lore, man and woman together, 2 strands of DNA, right? The marriage, 2 strands of DNA under God, which is in the cell where DNA is created, right? 2-stranded DNA, man and woman. Adam and Eve, that's Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, Adam is 1 strand, Eve is another strand. In in DNA, when you look at DNA, one strand spirals down, Adam, and one strand spirals up, Eve. One down, one up, intertwined, right? Man, and the opposite of man is woman. It's not the opposite, it's DNA. So you translate all of this spiritual information, you come up with an incredible amount of new information. And I think that this new information is what we could use to elevate ourselves out of this slumber. Okay, now let's try to wrap this up. So DNA is a software, it's an artificial intelligence. And we live in a world that's based on frequency. Frequency, right? Frequency. And the DNA, the software, is interacting with that frequency. It keeps us alive. It keeps us a certain frequency. Now, let's cover one other small thing, and then we'll wrap it up. When in the past people prayed to different gods, you know, in a lot of mythology, there's a central god, there's Zeus, and then there's the lesser gods. There's the son of Zeus, the daughter of Zeus, and the cousin, right? There's Hera, and there's Thor, and there's Ares. There are all these other gods. If you look at Chinese mythology, multiple gods. If you look at Iranian mythology, multiple gods. Greek mythology, multiple gods. Roman mythology, multiple gods. Egyptian mythology, multiple gods. There's Anubis, there's, who else is? There's Hathor, there's Thoth, there's Osiris, and there's who's the king? Amun-Ra, right? There's Ra. So if you look at it from a microbiological way, and you think about DNA as software, because what's in the DNA? Genes. Genes. So there's one God, the main God, and inside are the lesser gods, genes. So when you pray to gods, when you pray to the lesser gods, you're technically praying to the genes. So when I pray to Ares, or when I pray to Hera, or Anubis, I'm praying. So again, it goes back to DNA, and within DNA are the lesser gods, which are genes. So I can pray to my genie, the genie in the bottle, open up the genie, triggering the gene. You trigger the gene. I trigger Anubis. And Anubis helps me to connect to reality, right? I pray to the magicians. This is what they do. The magicians have a closer connection to the gods. I pray to Thor. And the gene, which is artificial intelligence, can connect me to the weather. And that gene can connect me to love. And that gene, that God, right? Because what is another way to call a gene? So, okay, so mythologically speaking, gods, lesser gods. Microbiology is genes. Technologically, application. A software application, an app. So when you want to do something on your smartphone, you use an app. So what if your genes, because they're software, are like apps, reality apps? Of course, understand something. We're disconnected from all of this information, so it doesn't work properly. You don't have access to it properly, and there's a lot of interference and blocks and old information that has to be flushed out. But just think of it on a theoretical level. Instead of praying to God, we don't pray to God. We don't pray to Thor anymore, right? But how do you pray to a gene? Well, gene, you think, well, it's biology. It's not. But if a gene is artificial intelligence and it's like software, it's an app. If you could activate the app to help you do something in life, it can help you do that. And then the app, close down the app, right? So you just use your phone, your tablet, go on an app. And there's new apps all the time. So it should also be the case that there are new genes being expressed. And if they're not being triggered, if they're being blocked, or we can't communicate because we're looking up instead of in, we can't access those genes and we can't trigger, right, that information. So that's the science of reality. That's a big recap. We're scratching the surface. I think we'll talk about this more. But those are some basics I think are important. That we are living in a, so you see, we are living in a technological reality. Because in my reality, genes are more like apps. And DNA is an AI software. And why do we have this software is because reality has an operating system, which is a more difficult discussion, right? We wouldn't be equipped with things like this if we did not exist in a world that is compatible. So reality is technological. There's an operating system. And these genetic processes help us to go through life. And what we've done is we started out by calling them the Father, the Creator, and God. And then we've held on to that thing. We've never changed it. We've never improved it. But now we are at a level of computer science where we can improve it. We can understand it. And it'll take some time. It'll take some practice. My view is that reality has a science because we live in a technological reality. And we are far more technological than we realize. And you could say that, we live in a synthetic world. It's technologically created. It's a synthetic world, and that we are also synthetic. But the level of science is so high that it appears biological. It appears real. And that's part of the design. The design is it needs to be convincing. And so far, everyone is convinced. So the design is good. But to advance our culture, we have to now see what the design is. And that will take us to the next level. We need to and I think this should have been done a long time ago. And it's been so much interference that it's come down to this. And this will be this is the path to the big awakening. That we live in a synthetic world. And that we are synthetic. And it's built on a science that is millions, if not billions of years ahead of our science. Right? We are not the most advanced scientists. It's so far ahead. And what they've done is, what these other beings have done is, they have elevated our computer science and our mobile technology and our software applications and our internet and our telecom networks. They've elevated it slowly elevated it so that we can understand the true nature of reality. That's what they're doing, right? The more and more technology, the more advanced technology gets, the hope is that we can understand what I'm talking about. That's what we need to get to. That this is plausible. That if you keep advancing technology, it begins to look like life. Okay, we've gone overboard. Sorry, it's long. If you've watched to the end, good luck. And I have written about all of this in more details and gone into many deeper topics as well.